may have to investigate Barack Obama's administration because they are finding, after getting the intelligence briefings, that it's much easier on the campaign trail to say, shut down Gitmo, than it is to shut down Gitmo.
They didn't create it, and that's the problem. Is they've got to deal now with what is a mess.
You say they didn't,
and it's
create
legally
it,
a
Mika.
mess.
September 11th created a lot.
Created opportunity for some people in the administration to take advantage of our fears and create situations that are perhaps very, very challenging to our Constitution.
I hate to say this, but I'm going to be very careful with my words. Democratic leaders were briefed fully on what was happening post 9/11. In Gitmo, with aggressive interrogation techniques, they went along with it. Newsweek reported on waterboarding, as I've said time and again, in 2003. We got an overwhelming amount of our information from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed because of waterboarding. It wasn't until Dana Priest wrote an article, I believe it was in 2004, that won a Pulitzer Prize, or 2005, and suddenly it was chic to say, oh, this is the worst thing ever, oh, this is torture, that suddenly the worm turned, and these things that were helping us get away from September 11th without another attack suddenly became morally reprehensible. Barack Obama is finding, and his cabinet is finding, and his foreign policy apparatus is finding, that what is said on ACLU websites and on campaign trails in Iowa in the snows of January don't line up with reality.
Do you think Barack Obama will support waterboarding? Do you think there will be waterboarding in an Obama
Waterboarding
administration?
won't work anymore because we as Americans have talked about waterboarding so much that Al-Qaeda, who studies what we do, Al-Qaeda said, okay, this is what's going to happen. They're going to pour water in. We're going to do it. You're going to feel like you're drowning. Work through it, okay? Because they can't kill you.
So do you think the Obama guys are going to invent new forms of torture that Al-Qaeda doesn't know about?
Well, it depends on how you define torture. I think Barack Obama will. Let me ask you: do you think Barack Obama will ever sign a piece of paper that says, "Let's not interrogate aggressively. Let's pull back. Let's shut down Gitmo. Let's not be aggressive in trying to stop the next 9/11 from happening"? Because if he does, when the next 9/11 happens, they know they will be responsible. I've seen how this works.
I think Guantanamo will be shut down by the Obama administration. And on aggressive interrogation, I think that's a really dangerous term. It has sort of an Orwellian flavor to it. I do think there's a clear line between torture and interrogation.
Oh, what is it?
What's the line?
Yeah, what's the line? When did waterboarding become torture?
Waterboarding has always been torture.
Oh, has it really?
Pat.
Can I read your column from 2003 when we found out the Khalid Sheikh?
Some of what they describe as the stress postures, I would call those torture too. And I think certain levels of sleep deprivation are torture as well.
Sleep deprivation's torture.
Depending on how far you go.
So tell me, what should we do? Should we just bring him a birthday cake and ask him what soccer match they'd like to see?
No, I think that's unfair, Joe. I think that there are ways
it's
to
not
question
unfair.
people.
It's realistic.
No, it's not.
Sleep deprivation is torture?
Depending on how long it goes on, Joe.
I can't even engage in this conversation.
Joe, I think that there is a real politique reason.
I can't even engage in this conversation. Yes, it is. We live in a dangerous world, and you sit in the comfort 7 years later after 9/11.
We live in a very dangerous world, Joe, but there are...
I'm going to be talking to you.
Can I ask you one practical question? Can I ask you one practical question?
No, I'm going to be talking to you.
Just one.
Let me say something. I'm going to be talking to you the day after 9/11 because you sit, and everybody out there sits in the comfort 7 years later of not being attacked, of what George Bush and Dick Cheney did. And it's funny how in 2001, in the fall of 2001, and in 2002, and in 2003, most of these things were fine with most people, 80% of Americans. The further we got away from it, suddenly it was evil. And George Bush and Dick Cheney were the most evil people.
And judgments made in haste are not necessarily the right ones. And it is, in fact, in times of haste that people can make their most dangerous, most morally questionable decisions. The real thing about yes, I think
the one that sat through all this,
but the real issue with torture, Joe, which I think is really important to bear in mind, is there is not a lot of evidence that the actual information you get works. And for me, one of the people whose opposition to torture I find the most credible is John McCain, who is a person who has experienced it, and who is a person who has said very early and very courageously that this was not the right thing to do.
Hold on a second.
But I think Mika wanted to let Pat attack me also.
Actually, we're not going to even go there, Krystia. On John McCain, we've gone there before. We're not going to go there again.
Why not?
But I'll tell you off air. But I will tell you this, and there's a very good reason. I will tell you this, that when you say torture, you define waterboarding as torture, right?
In my view, yes.
So when you say torture doesn't work, you're saying waterboarding doesn't work.
I think the problem with information that people get under torture is when people are tortured, they will say what they think their interrogators want to hear. And so the information overall is unreliable. That doesn't mean, Joe, that some information you get...
Does waterboarding work or not?
I am answering your question,
Does
Joe.
waterboarding work or not?
And my answer is this. My answer is this.
Does waterboarding work or not?
Some information you get might be reliable, but a lot of it won't be. And if you get a mixture of reliable and unreliable information, it is all tainted.
I hate to say this because I'm going to sound like Mika's dad here. You were speaking of things in which you have no idea what you're talking about.
Do you, Joe?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I know for a fact that waterboarding brought our interrogators, brought Americans, probably about 70 to 75% of what they got. What they got from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed opened doors that we are still going through. We have captured and killed so many people because of waterboarding. So you can say, if you want, that waterboarding is immoral. Fine. That's your judgment. Waterboarding's immoral.
I do say that, but I also think that the information you get is highly questionable.
But it's not.
It is.
It is not.
I actually think there's a moral issue about
And I agree with that.
All right, hold on, let Pat talk.
Well, I just have to say for the record, if anybody's out there watching this, and then I'm just going to be quiet and let you all live in your fantasy world, waterboarding has produced and given so much evidence to our people in the CIA and in other intelligence agencies. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed by himself has done more to crush Al-Qaeda than Dick Cheney or George Bush because of waterboarding. And that's all I'm going to say this segment.
Let me ask you, Blago quotes Kipling. He said, it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy's such a bore, but 'tis the savior of his country when the guns began to roar. The guns began to roar in 2003, and now we haven't been hit in 2001. Right. Now we haven't been hit in 7 years, and we're going after the guys who have protected us. We're sitting on a high moral ground, and they got a very moral dilemma for them back in those days, and we're sitting here in judgment on them, and that's what I find problematic.
But Mika and I aren't talking about the political issue, about judgment of specific people. We're talking about whether this is the kind of country America wants to be.
Well, we don't want to be in a war with terrorists either. We didn't declare the war.
Absolutely right, but you do choose how you respond to it.
We've got to go to break. I find it stunning that George Bush and the Bush administration have been accused of shredding the Constitution because they don't want to extend habeas corpus rights to terror suspects who aren't even citizens, extending constitutional rights to non-citizens. I mean, the standards have shifted so dramatically. George Bush didn't suspend habeas corpus for Americans like Abraham Lincoln did. He didn't throw 150,000 Japanese Americans or Muslim Americans in to prison like FDR did. He didn't do the things that were done during World War I like Wilson did. War creates some dramatic choices. Dramatic choices were made, and
I don't see anything wrong with looking at what we've done.
And do you think the internment of Japanese Americans was a good thing?
Do you think
calling George Bush all the names
Cheney should be you think Cheney and Bush and these fellows should be investigated and prosecuted?
I'm not sure, but I do think a moral judgment should be made by the country.
You know, Pat,
I think we've got something to talk about on the radio today.
You brought up a great topic about if you shoot Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, fine.
You have a moral right to kill him.
If you torture him, hold on, let me make my point here, everybody. If you torture him, you can't. So you know what? You know what's happening now? Instead of interrogating these terror suspects, they're kicking down doors and shooting them. Because if they kick down, and this is how screwed up things are. Hey, Krystia, we got to go to break.
Allows people to be executed. It doesn't allow people to be tortured.
Okay.
That's your law.
Chris, I'm not going to go until I can make my point. And my point is very clear, and I'm trying to explain to people how things really are, not how we want them to be. They understand now that if they kick down doors and shoot people, they're heroes. If shoot them indiscriminately, they're heroes, terror suspects, and it's on the front page of the New York Times, and all's fine, it's a big victory. If they arrest them and take them to Guantanamo Bay and try to get information out of them and keep them awake for 24 hours. They're evil. They're torturers. So you know what? They're kicking down. This is the reality. They're kicking down the doors and they're shooting them and letting God sort them out. That is what we've come to, because now even keeping people awake is torture.
I think we need to look back at this and we need to learn from it. That's what our country does.
I think we need to go to break.
Krystia Freeland from the Financial Times, thank you so much.
It was a good way to wake everybody.
Yeah, I'm awake.
What does Peggy Noonan say? Morning Joe is like drinking 2 Red Bulls.